At this time, the defense calls Dr. Moore to the stand.
Dr. Moore, you may take the stand.
Yes, Your Honor. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Of course. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Rutherford Moore.
Why are you here today, Dr. Moore?
Sure, I was retained by defense counsel to analyze the possibility that Mr. Campbell suffered a retinal stroke, which may have incapacitated his abilities as a pilot.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a professional pharmacologist with my own pharmaceutical consulting firm in Annapolis City, Midlands. I'm also a licensed ophthalmologist, which means I can study the eyes.
Where did you go to school to become an ophthalmologist?
Of course. I obtained my degree in chemistry at Dillard University, where I then went on to complete my master's and PhD at Georgetown. Finally, I completed my residency at Stanford Medical Care.
Dr. Moore, I want to turn to your review of this case specifically. What materials did you review?
I reviewed a number of materials given to me, but there were two that really stood out to me. The first was a prescription for a medication called Fullerton, and the second was a Mayday call that Mr. Campbell made shortly before the crash.
Were the materials that you reviewed sufficient to reach your conclusions to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Absolutely.
What methods did you use to analyze those materials?
I used what's called the diagnostic investigation method. It's the gold standard in my field, rigorously peer-reviewed and used by some of the leading figures in my industry.
And did you reliably apply this diagnostic investigation method pursuant to the standards of your field?
I certainly did.
Now let's talk about what you found when you applied that method, starting from the very basics. Could you explain to us what a stroke is?
Sure. So, in simple terms, the blood, the organs of the body, right, they need oxygen to survive, and oxygen is brought by blood through blood vessels. Now, when a blood clot forms in one of those blood vessels, the oxygen in the blood is unable to get to those organs, and they start to die.
So, what's the difference between a stroke and a retinal stroke?
They're the same general concept, but a retinal stroke is a little bit more complicated. I actually brought a demonstration to help actually talk about it.
Permission to approach the witness with the demonstration he brought to trial today, which has been shown to opposing counsel during captain's meetings.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
You may approach.
Thank you.
Dr. Moore, could you use this demonstration to show us what a retinal stroke is?
Of course. So what we're looking at here is a model of the human eye. This is, something you would see in your high school biology textbook. The thing we're interested in is this artery here along the side. This is what we call the retinal artery. So if there's a blood clot that forms within that retinal artery, the light that is gathered by the pupil of the eye is unable to reach through the artery to the brain, meaning essentially that when that happens, a person cannot see.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Permission to retrieve the demonstrative.
You may.
Thank you, Ms. Milwaukee. Dr. Moore, how did you determine a retinal stroke was a possibility in this case?
Of course. Like I said earlier, there were two major pieces of evidence out of everything I reviewed that put things in motion. The first one was a prescription for a medication called Fullerton.
What is Fullerton?
Fullerton is a common antibiotic you would probably find in any pharmacy. Treats ear infections, that sort of like.
Well, how does Fullerton relate to the possibility of retinal stroke?
One of the symptoms of taking the medication Fullerton is actually experiencing dizziness. And dizziness, although it may seem insignificant, is what we call a correlated side effect to having a retinal stroke. Basically meaning there's causation between the two.
So if somebody is taking Fullerton and experiences dizziness, does this make them more likely to experience a retinal stroke?
Oh, absolutely. Of the demographic of people who are taking Fullerton and experience that symptom of dizziness, Over 74% of them go on to experience a retinal stroke.
Was there any evidence you reviewed that led you to believe Mr. Campbell might have been experiencing dizziness?
There was, yes. I reviewed the statement of D.B. Gelfand, a witness on the day of the crash who saw Mr. Campbell seemingly trip and fall over nothing. It may seem insignificant, but in the field of medicine, that's something you cannot ignore. And to me, it indicated a potential for dizziness.
Dr. Moore, was there any evidence you reviewed that indicated to you that Mr. Campbell actually went on to suffer a retinal stroke?
There was, yes. As I mentioned earlier, the second bit of evidence that put things into perspective for me was the Mayday call that he made before the crash.
Would you recognize this Mayday call if it were played for you in trial today?
I certainly would, yes.
Let the record reflect that I'm not playing a segment of Exhibit 2, which, pursuant to Stipulation 10, all objections have been waived to.
And record will reflect.
Dr. Moore, what portion of that audio transcript call led you to believe that Mr. Campbell could have suffered a retinal stroke?
The main thing that I heard in that call was that Mr. Campbell said, "I can't see." This is the leading sign of a retinal stroke.
Dr. Moore, after you reviewed all of this evidence, what was your overall conclusion in this case?
I concluded that I absolutely cannot rule out the possibility that a retinal stroke incapacitated Mr. Campbell's abilities as a pilot on the day of the crash.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Moore. As of right now, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Moore. I would first like to discuss how you conducted your investigation into this case. You called it the gold standard,
Yes, ma'am, I did.
but you also admit that it is an atypical standard in your field.
It's not.
It's not atypical to not interview witnesses?
Oh, for the actual application of the case, yes. It may be atypical utilizing the method to not interview any witnesses. However, it was perfectly acceptable not to do so, as it wasn't necessary to find my conclusions.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And you were not able to speak to Reese Campbell's primary care physician, were you?
Unfortunately not. Even before I was contacted for this case, I learned that Dr. Lauren Parker had passed away due to a tragic accident.
And you were not able to obtain any of Reese Campbell's medical records, were you?
I was not. Those are protected by patient privilege.
And you were not able to gather any evidence that confirmed that Reese Campbell was having any symptoms of a retinal stroke, were you?
Well, counselor, the first sign that you have a retinal stroke is when you have it.
So there's not dizziness or a correlation with other symptoms?
Those are symptoms for taking Fullerton.
And have no correlation to a retinal stroke?
They do, yes. I just want to clarify that the first sign that you're actually having that retinal stroke is when you have it and lose vision.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And you do not have an opinion as to whether or not this crash was caused by pilot error, do you?
Of course not. That's not why I was retained here today.
Thank you. And originally you declined to provide an assessment in this case, didn't you?
I did, yes. This was during the initial stage of the investigation where there wasn't much evidence, and so I viewed it as not really necessary to take the case on.
But when you were offered a 20% extra premium, you found that evidence and took the case?
Well, yes, they added the premium because they came to me with the relevant evidence. And at that stage, I determined that there was enough to warrant an investigation.
And you've never been retained in a case regarding an aircraft, have you?
No, I have not.
And you've never been retained in a case regarding a retinal stroke?
No, I've never testified in a case revolving a retinal stroke, no.
And you have never been retained to discuss any of the side effects of the medication Fullerton, have you?
Not until present, no.
And in fact, Fullerton has decreased the sales of soxycycline, correct?
That's right, yes.
By 80%?
That number seems accurate, yes.
Objection, Your Honor, to outside the scope of this witness's knowledge under 702.
Response.
Your Honor, this witness does have knowledge, and this is laying foundation for future knowledge and laying foundation for bias as to the medication Fullerton for this expert witness.
Response, Your Honor? Your Honor, we've established that this witness is an expert ophthalmologist. We haven't established this witness as an expert in the field of pharmaceutical stocks, and asking this witness about how certain stocks of certain pharmaceutical companies have affected other stocks of certain pharmaceutical companies, well, that's far outside this witness's expertise under 702.
If I may respond, Your Honor. This expert was also entered, this witness was also entered as an expert as a pharmacologist with their own company, and we are not asking about stock sales. We are simply asking about sales, which is something that a pharmacologist would have inside knowledge about.
And how is this relevant?
It'll go to show a future bias with the medication Fullerton, which this witness has testified to its correlation with eye strokes.
Right, as long as you lay the proper foundation, I'll allow the cross-examination on this point.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes,
Would
Your
you
Honor.
like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So Fullerton has decreased the sales of soxycycline
Yes, it has.
by around 80%, would you say?
The number seems accurate.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moore. And your spouse owns the company that makes soxycycline, correct?
No, that's not true.
Your spouse has no correlation with soxycycline?
Julia works as a lead medical officer at Everett's Pharmaceuticals, which manufactures soxycycline, but she's by no means the owner of the company.
My apologies, Dr. Moore. That was a miswording on my half. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course.
And Dr. Moore, Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel with what has previously been marked as Exhibit 15 and previously admitted into evidence. Did I also have a spot on it? Or something else that you want to use your Thank you. I should just need one, but thank you so much. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness? You may.
Thank you.
And if I could direct your attention and the attention of the jury to what has previously been published under Exhibit 15. Dr. Moore, you're familiar with this?
Yes, this is the prescription information for the Fullerton tablet that Mr. Campbell took.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And underneath Missy's pharmacy, in the red text that starts with "Keep out of reach of children," can you see that? I know it is quite small.
It is quite small, and this is the enlarged version, but yes, I can see it.
Could you read that for the court?
The entire block there?
You can stop at medication.
Sure. Keep out of reach of children, important disclaimer. The side effects described in this document may not necessarily reflect all of the possible risks that could be caused by this medication.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Now, if I could direct your attention to the side effects section as well.
Sure.
Towards the midsection, you will see a paragraph or sentence starting with "rarely Fullerton may cause."
Yes.
Do you see where I am? If you could read that until blindness for the court.
Sure. Rarely, Fullerton may cause a very serious eye problem. If left untreated, this eye problem can lead to temporary or permanent blindness.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And one more reading for the court, if you don't mind. Underneath precautions, if you could read from "talk to your pharmacist" to "medical history."
Sure. Talk to your pharmacist for more details. Before using this medication, tell your doctor or pharmacist your medical history.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore. So when we read that rarely Fullerton may cause a very serious eye problem, would you call a retinal stroke a very serious eye problem?
Yes, however, that's a very different kind of disease than the serious eye problem mentioned here. The eye problem here results in the degradation of the cornea, which is actually a long-term disease. A retinal stroke is very different, and medical certifications require the specific term retinal stroke.
Could you read for us from this label where it says that the very serious eye problem is a degradation of the cornea?
Of course. It doesn't list it here. I mean, there's barely enough room to fit all the text, so it's perfectly understandable that every detail wouldn't be included.
Completely understandable, Dr. Moore. No further questions at this time.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor, brief redirect. And Dr. Moore, I want to start with something that you left off on cross-examination, Exhibit 15.
Of course.
Does it say the words retinal stroke anywhere on this document?
No, it does not.
Even if it did say the words retinal stroke, in your experience as a pharmacologist, do your patients often even read the information sheets inside their pill bottles?
Not all the time, no.
As of right now, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Very briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Moore, you believe very strongly that everybody should be aware of any side effects of their medications?
Yes, I believe that all people should be aware of the side effects. However, we live in an imperfect world.
Of course. And you believe it is their responsibility to become aware of these side effects?
I would certainly think so.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
No, redirect, Your Honor. I ask that the witness be excused.
You may step down.
Your Honor, if I may approach the jury box and,
Right.
just kidding, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.